Hi, I'm Ronnie from Ronnie's Garage. Today we're having our monthly tech meet where we're going to be talking about the Silver Shadow series. We're going to talk about the differences between the Silver Shadow 1 and the Silver Shadow 2. A common failure on these is one of these limit switches, which controls how far these go, will fault. And what happens is the motor keeps turning this big plastic gear. There's a big plastic gear down in here, and it'll break. And there's a spring load in it. This is, if it fails going in this direction, what happens is this goes right against this bar here and it breaks that gear. If it fails going the other direction, if you look at the other servo, these are spring loaded. So this, if the switch fails going this way, unless it just totally keeps going, it won't break anything. But coming down, if it hits this bar, it'll break that gear. These are made so that you have that, I guess, the safety mode. But that's a common fault. These gears break. I've seen a lot of those. And if you fix one of these gears, you can buy these gears, but you better know what you're doing here before you tear this all apart. There's a lot of little bushings, and you got to get the position of these things in the right place. When I take them apart, I mark the gears so that at least I'm close on them. You can tweak it with the micro switches and these trimming potentiometers.
Now, the control linkage from here to the dampers or whatever they're controlling, how much friction is in that? How much load does it take?
Not much. They've got, all they are is metal flaps with foam pieces on them to seal with a lever. And they've got these rubber bushings that hold them up. And they're like not even a quarter-inch shafts. They should not bind, but if they are binding, if something like in these cars, there's a lot of plastic ducting. And if something, gets so hot that it deforms and causes a problem, then that's something you want to address. And these linkages, you can always disconnect them from these arms and you can operate them.
Okay. So if the linkage would seize up, if that also probably damage.
There's a lot of things that can cause them to fail. Back in the 70s, I was working on these a lot, 70s and 80s. I don't run into too many problems with these. A lot of people don't want to spend what it takes to do it. Sometimes it takes. But there was a time you could buy these rebuilt from Rolls-Royce, and they were like $2,100 exchange. And for me to think, well, maybe it's just that little micro switch in that $200 gear, maybe I can fix it. So I did that for a lot of people. This system, the later system, let me get the test box for that. The other one's interesting.
Is your car running out?
Here's the test box for this system. It's got, it's upside down. What you do is you unplug the wires from the car that plug into this. We just replaced this on the car, so I got to send it back. But the plugs, they go onto this circuit board. There are actually, these go to the little servo motors, these plugs. There's one for each side that operate the flaps. And then there's the big plugs that plug in. You plug them into the machine, so you isolate this from the system. And then you run through all these tests and test everything else, the flaps, the sensors, and all that kind of stuff. And everything, if everything else checks out, the next step on the checklist, replace this. So there's no way to check this. You just check the rest of the system. This one, you can check everything on it. You can check the positions. If your voltages go out of whack on this, you know where to look and where to fix, and it's mechanical. But this one has got, like I said, that voodoo magic in there.
And what year was the switch over to that one?
20,000 series, I think it's. So that was like 88, 87, 88, right in there.
What is that one called?
It's for about 700 exchange. Not too bad.
That's not bad.
I think I paid $2,000 for that. We've had this since my dad opened the shop, so. You can buy these now. I think Paul's not here. I think somebody's making these for about $400 or $500. You can buy right now. So those are the biggest changes: the steering, carburetors, and then this. I think is what really changed these. And like I was saying when I was sitting in that car, this does not, on this style of automatic air, doesn't have a fresh air option. If you just want air from outside coming in. The later cars, they do. They have a economy, I think it's called, position for the fans. So that will just blow outside air, won't be refrigerated, and you can actually control the temperature of that, and it's just outside air without the AC compressor running.
Is that basically like the non-circulate? When sometimes you see that?
They have a recirc option also, which is almost all modern cars with air conditioning have that. And that's so you just shut the outside air off. Like if you're stuck behind a truck or you're going through dairy zone, which stinks like, horrible, that recirc option is great. The later cars, they do have it. I think besides that, should have it. No, this one does. Speed station. Yeah, this does have a recirc button on it. But the later cars, but into the 90s, they also have a recirc position switch.
Are the toolkits the same in the trunk for all these cars?
The toolkits for the Shadows, yeah, they're about the same. Because when they went to the Spirits and Spurs, they changed it a little bit. They moved the tools up above the gas tank.
Is there a difference in the ignition systems between this one and this one? I noticed this one looks like it might have an aftermarket. Are they points?
Originally, no, there was no difference. It was a Lucas Opus, they called it, which had an amplifier built into the distributor, and that took place of points. So it provides that make, break, firing point for the coil. The original ones got to be unobtainable for a while, plus they got up to over $1,000 for that, and they're prone to failure. And if you look at that car, there's a crane cam. That's a hot rod aftermarket replacement. They make one that bolts right into the Opus style Rolls-Royce, Jaguar, many British cars. For, I think I pay $130 for that whole unit that just bolts in, as opposed to a $900,000 thing you might be able to get. It's electronic ignition, just so you know. 74 was the last Shadow with the points. 75 they came up with the electronic ignition. One thing about the Corniche is, it's not so much on the later cars. They've got this big rubber conduit in here with all these wires that go through there. And the Corniches were the worst about this. The early Shadows had the same thing. And this opening and closing with the big heavy gauge wires, remember there's still like 14 gauge or bigger, depending on what it's going to in there. You do this enough times, or if that conduit gets broken and it gets dislodged and it kinks it, a lot of broken wires in those I've found. So a lot of times the car will come in and the guy says the window doesn't work, and it works fine with the door closed. You close it, it quits working. That's because the wire's breaking in there. And I've seen a lot of people use those stupid little crimp butt connectors right in there, right where it broke, where it bends all the time. They use one of those things, and it's going to fail very shortly after. So the proper fix is actually to pull the kick panel out, access the wires going in there. They go in through a big rubber plug, and then replace the entire wire into the door with a new wire instead of, you can use your butt connectors if you want to. I usually solder and shrink wrap them on something like that where it's a high use thing, or out in the engine compartment where it's a heat thing. But you've got to replace it where it bends all the time, otherwise it's just going to fail again. This is the kick panel right here, where you put your foot up against on the side. Wires come in here, then they go through a little area inside the fender well, and then they go out to the door. So every time you close it and open it, it does this. So eventually, I've even seen body shops pull doors and just cut all the wires there. You just want to shoot them. Because, 2 more minutes, you'd be right where the plug was, and you could just pull the plug out. But that's where they usually fail. And when they get old and, you know, it's not made to last forever. But the modern cars, they use a really small wiring, really like 20 gauge wire. None of this stuff even applies here. This is all good size wiring. If you look at this shadow right here, this is a late 76. And on the other side of it, it has a fuel door up here in this thing, up in the seat post. Earlier cars, prior to this 76, early 76, they had the gas tank on the other side down below. And what happened is in 76 range, they made them move the gas tanks up here instead of under the car. And I think it may be in response to that whole Ford Pinto exploding car thing. They thought it was too dangerous underneath the car. So in their brilliance, the automakers now, federally mandated, the gas tanks are plastic and they're underneath the back seat. And you know, they're outside the car, but they have big access plugs you have to get to the fuel sending units. They have dual fuel sending units. I worked at Jaguar long enough to hate those. They were always flagging engine codes, check engine code, because one of your fuel gauges didn't match the other. So that's supposed to be a safety thing. They move the gas tank up here. The corniche like this, you can see the gas doors up here. They moved it. It's a different shaped one, totally different from the Shadow. The Shadow is upright, right behind the back seat. You open the trunk and it's behind that panel. Whereas the really early Shadows, well, early 76 and back, the trunk was huge on those things because the gas tank was underneath.
Windshield washer reservoir.
Aha! Somebody's looking. This silver Shadow, the early Shadow 1, or the Shadow 1, it has the windshield washer reservoir up there right by the engine. Mm-hmm. This one, if you look, here's the filler right here. All right? Oh, there's the cap.
Good thing I wasn't looking for snakes.
Oh, that's the filler, but it has a big, down outside the car, and inside here is a big reservoir. And they mounted it rigidly, so the plastic deforms after time, and they almost always leak, because where they mount it, it cracks on the plastic. So this one, what I did when I put it in, I put rubber mounts on it to keep it from going bad.
There's nowhere to see it anywhere, like open the door jamb to see how much fluid's in there. It's either you notice it's full or...
They have a sensor.
There you go.
Yeah, they have a sensor. This one has a sensor too, if you look at it. It should be... There should be some wires on... Oh, see, there's some wires over here that are disconnected. There's actually a sensor on the side of that one. All right, thanks for joining us.
My car costs a little bit more than 2 of these.